And I just wanted to show you this slide. So, so where you see Joppa, which is where Jonah ends up going down to get a ship. Obviously, he was a court prophet, so he was living near or somewhere near Jerusalem, if not in Jerusalem. So Nineveh was to the east, 500 northeast, 550 miles, and now we can see where Tarshish was, right? All the way at the bottom of Spain. Nineveh is what would be the current day Mosul in Iraq. So I just wanted you to have a sense of where God was sending him and then where he decides. And Tarshish at that time was, for them, that was the end of the earth. They didn't know anything past that. So as far as they were concerned, that was the end of the world. And that's where Jonah decided to go. Okay, so just a little bit of kind of perspective as to what was happening behind the scenes, and that the Assyrian people were just kind of a ruthless military that had destroyed the northern kingdom previously. So there is all this history before God asks anything of Jonah. That is Jonah's understanding. Okay, so who wants to be our reader for today? Maybe one person reads and we'll just let them read our whole read each section as we go. Volunteers.
God, I'll do it.
Okay, Pete. So why don't we do verses 1 to 3, and we'll get started there.
Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord.
Okay, so the Lord asks two things of Jonah. What does he ask him?
To go and to preach against the evil, the wickedness that's come up.
Yeah. So why do we think he decides to go, as the map showed, all the way to what he understood as the end of the earth, to the west? Why do you think he's fleeing?
Don't imagine he thought he'd be received very well from these warlike people telling them they were wrong. And when they have all of this wonderfulness around them and they were violent people. It'd be a little nerve-wracking.
We thought it'd be a hard job. Yeah. we might think that for sure. Other ideas?
Also was like hated, it was the enemy. He didn't want to go help them.
Yeah.
Let God be mad at them. He didn't care.
Yeah, so God said, preach against the wickedness, and Nineveh, and Jonah might have said, well, if I'm bringing the word of the Lord and they hear it, then they'll be redeemed in God's eyes. And this is Jonah's hated people. These are pagans.
These are not redeemable.
Yeah. Do I want God to redeem these folks? He might have had some fear there too. Other thoughts? Jonah might have said, I don't want them to hear the word of God.
I haven't been trained. I don't think he was trained in that job description, probably.
That's what Moses said too, right? I'm not trained in this job description.
I'm not
Don't give me that job.
it's above my pay grade.
Above my pay grade. Right. So he's going to go to you. We saw kind of that 3D representation of what that place would have been like, and how intimidating that would have been to go there and say, well, you're worshiping all the wrong way. You conquered us, but this is what I have, this is the word that God is sending me with. But he pays his fare and he gets on a ship to Tarshish, as we see was the bottom of Spain, away from the presence of the Lord.
Trying to run away. Reminds you of the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve were trying to hide.
Yeah.
How'd that work out?
Not successfully.
Not so great, right? Can't hide. You can run, but you can't hide.
You can run, but you can't hide from God's presence, right?
In that in the first section that Peter read, the third verse, well, down a ways, it says, he went to Joppa where he paid his fare and went aboard with the crew to sail to Spain, where he would be away from the Lord. I guess he thought that he could hide from the Lord or from God. And something, wasn't going to happen.
He's thinking, okay, if my physical being is not here,
Yeah.
God will never know where I am.
Well, because, for them, God was in the temple, right? And if I go as far as I could possibly go, this is what I might think of as the end of the earth. How could God find me and know that I'm not listening to him and ignoring and going completely?
Forget about me.
Yeah, and not just ignoring him, but going opposite direction as far as he can. Perhaps God isn't there. Maybe that's what Jonah had in his mind. Okay, Pete, could you read verse 4?
But the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up.
This reminds you of any other stories we've heard in the Bible?
It obviously wasn't as sturdy a boat as Noah had. He didn't break up or threaten to break up. He stood the flood. I guess he had no storm, huh? He just had the water.
When Jesus was out with the fishermen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Paul too. Remember, Paul was out amongst his travels and a big storm had come up. Okay, let's do 5 and 6, Pete.
5 and 6. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had lain down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish."
Again, Jesus was sleeping. Remember, Jesus was asleep on the ship? And I think Paul also was asleep when the storm came up.
They're pulling out all the plugs. They're pulling out all the stops for any variety. Well, if this God doesn't work, maybe the next God will. Maybe the next God will, because they weren't united as to one God, one true God. They were trying anything, any help they could get from any God they could get it from.
Now in verse 4, it said, the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. So, do we think this is A message? A message?
Well, I think it was done on purpose. It wasn't just a like chance, you know, the Lord had the control over it. The violent storm.
So who showed the faith in the Lord here? The mariners, the other seamen, or Jonah?
Seaman. Jonah was avoiding the Lord by sleeping.
All right.
Like going on the ship to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And then the captain said, "Get up. Perhaps your God will spare us." Call on your God. Okay, Pete, let's look at 7 and 8.
And they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, "Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? And where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?"
So what do we think about this line of questioning here?
Trying to find out who to blame for all the problems.
Right. Yeah.
Also, God is, I mean, Jonah did the opposite of what God said, but God is still using Jonah. Jonah has an opportunity here to now to tell him about God.
True.
So he's still being used,
Yeah.
the way God intended. Maybe not to the same people yet, but
I
Oh,
love
no,
that.
yeah. God does not give up on Jonah, even though Jonah wants God to give up on him. He's like, please give up on me.
Trying his best to duck out.
And it's like, because he's the odd man out, right? Everyone else had been on the boat for a while, probably gone on other trips together. And here comes along this person they didn't know, that all of a sudden hops on the boat and then goes down and hides. And they're like, and all of a sudden this trouble starts. They're like, wait a minute. Why is this happening?
Okay, Pete, let's go to 9 and 10.
And he said to them, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord, because he told them.
Mm.
I think it's interesting the way he describes, "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." He kind of invokes the whole, my Lord is the creator, I'm a Hebrew. My God is the creator of everything, the sea and the land.
But then they in turn blame him. They say, "What have you done?" And they knew that he was running away from the Lord. So by running away, what had he done? He brought this terrible storm and this tragedy on the boat full of the crew.
Doesn't sound good for Jonah at this point, right?
Mm-mm.
They've identified him, and now they know they suspect him of having done something to anger his God, the creator of everything. So they're even more afraid.
yeah. Also, I think it was kind of a reminder. I think Jonah was reminded himself by his own words that, yeah, I can't really do this because God my God is God of everything, God of the heaven and the earth. And I guess that was stupid what I did. I don't know.
Right, who am I to fight against the creator of the world,
Power.
of the universe?
Power of the Lord, right?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Him, like, it's kind of the words he's saying to them is really him talking to himself. I love that idea. Yeah. And reminding God, I worship the Lord. I do. But that's kind of the point of this chapter, right? Or this entire book is, you know, Jonah's saying the right things, but not doing the right things, right? Okay, Pete, why don't we move on to 11 and 12?
Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. He said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you."
God that wasn't willing to go to Nineveh, but he's willing to sacrifice himself and tell them to throw him into the water.
I'd rather be dead, than go, like you said, then go to Nineveh. I don't want God to save those Ninevites. I hate them so much. They are the worst. The original sin city. I don't want God to have a word for them. I'd rather have myself killed than do anything to bring the Lord to Ninevites. Imagine hating that much. Rather sacrifice yourself than bring God to someone else.
Hmm.
It's like he really dug his heels in about not doing what was requested by God. God didn't want to help these other people.
Oh yeah, he's sticking to it, right?
Yeah.
He didn't shout out to God, all right, I'll go to Nineveh.
Turn off the storm.
He's like, throw me over. There's no way I'm going to Nineveh. Not doing it. I guess war. I mean, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom. What was it, like 1622, Pastor? I'm trying to remember. So, I mean, people in war, the amount of hatred. I mean, we were talking earlier about Ukraine and the Russian conflict and how every day, hatred grows in people because of what they're living through. And say, I would rather sacrifice myself than bring God and God's love, forgiveness, and redemption to Ninevites.
Hmm.
I'm not sure, we can get our head around that level of hatred, or maybe you can. Any other thoughts on that part? So Jonah's hanging on to his convictions against God, against what God commanded. His hatred for the Ninevites is so intense, he's willing to tell the sailors to throw him overboard. I'd rather you throw me off the ship.
He was pretty convinced that that would be the end of the problem now, that would be the solution. By throwing him into the sea, he was pretty convinced. He said, it will become, let's see, throw me into the sea and it will become calm. He was pretty confident that that was going to happen. I know it's my fault. A great storm has come to them because of it, of Jonah. So he said that would be the solution.
So maybe feeling some guilt about these poor sailors suffering on his account.
Brought it on them, yeah.
I think, yeah, Jonah's in a real struggle here because he obviously, he has no doubt about God. He has no doubt that God can do this and is doing it and will do it. But he thinks God's wrong. And he's saying, no, but maybe if I give him enough time, or maybe if I'm just, I'm willing to die. I know it's God, but this is a bad thing. I don't see this turning out well, and I rather die on my own terms, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than subject himself to whatever the Ninevites might do to him, or the long journey or whatever. He just, he's like, no, I'm out of here.
Okay, Pete, why don't we do 13 to 16?
Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore, they called out to the Lord, O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood for you. O Lord, have done as it pleased you. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows.
What did we think about this?
It worked.
It did, right? It did work. The sea ceased from its raging, but now the men, the men had to, kill somebody. Or so they thought. As the story does continue, obviously.
I think they exchanged one thing for the other, because now they're saying that don't let us die for taking Jonah's life, holding them accountable for killing him.
Now they switch from worshiping all their own individual pagan gods to worshiping the Hebrew God.
Worshiping Jonah.
Because they not only thanked him, they not only thanked God and gave sacrifice and everything, but then they made vows. So I'm assuming that means hopefully it'll continue in some way to fulfill their vow, whatever their vows were.
Yeah, so believers are created. And they're the ones that cry out to the Lord, right? We don't hear Jonah doing that.
What did I tell?
Jonah becomes the evangelist against his will.
Yeah.
He mean to do that. He's meant to hide out and run away. And he winds up turning this shipload of people that worshipped other gods into believers in his creator God.
All right, then how about our verse 17, Pete?
I was just going to make a comment on the
Oh, yeah.
The tail end of verse 16. made a sacrifice and made vows. I have to be honest and say the first thing that came to my mind after I read that was, gee, I wonder if that's the first recorded instance of people praying to God and say, if you just get me an A on this test, I promise I'll, you know. That was, okay, I'll move on.
You know,
That was my first thought. That was honestly was my first thought when I read that. First thing
who
that
among
popped
us
in.
haven't had tried to make a bargain with God at one time? or
Yeah,
another?
exactly. Well, isn't that what they did? I mean, you know,
Sure.
they you know, so
Oh,
that,
yeah. They're like, here, we're throwing him in. Please leave us alone.
Here's a sacrifice. We promise. Yep.
okay, verse 17, or the end of the chapter.
The end of the chapter. Yep.
And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights.
The classic part.
Number 3.
Yeah.
So 3 days and 3 nights. This was a kind of a traditional time of travel when they went to the what they called the underworld. So you find it all throughout the Bible is this idea of 3 days and 3 nights, and we also see it with
Easter Vigil readings.
Jesus in that in between space, right?
I think, and when I think about the Lord providing a fish to swallow up Jonah 3 days and 3 nights, I just spent the weekend sort of babysitting for my grandchildren kind of thing. And it just like it hit Peter about the day of the test. That the 3 days and 3 nights thing was like, time out, Jonah. I mean, you're getting nuts here. Yeah, time out. And he gave him this time out period to think about, to actually process what just all happened. It's just cool it, Jonah. You know, sit there when you thought about it and come back out. You can come out of the
how
naughty.
close to death you came. You should be dead.
Right. I love that. The great fish as they like the timeout spot. So why did God choose Jonah?
Well, he obviously was stubborn enough and persistent enough that he wouldn't give up easily. And I think you need to be that, because you're going to have to take a lot of guff and you have to be persistent. And I think he certainly was.
But again, just like in Job, he prays to God when he's at this low point in the belly of the fish. The next chapter is Jonas praying to God. Even
Not
though
only prayed to him, but he testified. He testified to the people on the boat about his God being the creator, the power to do that, to stop the storm.
yeah.
So Jonah has faith in God.
Yeah.
But did fear overwhelm him? Did hatred overwhelm him?
I think in the overwhelming, I mean, he just knew that it was wrong. I mean, to do this. I mean, he felt that to his bones, that even though God was God and he realized God was God, he thought God was wrong in this, at least for him. And so he was, it took a while to say, just you better just let God do it and
So he
see what.
needed some time out in the belly of the whale, right?
Yeah.
But God showed him mercy. I mean, God could have let him drown, right? Pick somebody else. None of that happened. And Jonah's brain just couldn't get around how God would care about Assyrians. They don't worship the God of Jacob and God of Abraham and the God of all creation. Why would God care about them? You know, that's Jonah's. How could God care about this brutal, hated enemy? responsible for destroying, the northern kingdom. How could God care? Why would God want them to hear his word? And Jonah couldn't wrap his brain around it.
Oh, things were very black and white. You were an enemy or you were a friend, and these were enemies, and that was it. And his enemies had to be God's enemies too.
Jonah's the prophet. He's the one running to Tarshish. Yet here are these sailors, and they're the ones that come to faith in this first chapter. It's fascinating story. But what are some other lessons that we can take from this chapter, and why it may be, why it's used at the vigil, perhaps? Well, God chooses the flawed, imperfect people, right? So we know that from lots of Bible stories, that God doesn't always choose the
A certain kind of brutal death, just like Jesus suffered on the cross, was not the end of his life, but the beginning of something else. No, Jonah didn't die getting swallowed, but went on.
It was given another chance. Yeah.
But it also talks about the God, as you said before, the God of heaven created. The vigil starts with Genesis, with the creation readings. So this kind of just confirms that Jonah talking about this mighty God that now, many years later after creation, is still lifting up the God that created the world. That God is still in the story of God's people.
I think for me, it's the idea that it's hard to love our enemies. It's was obviously hard for Jonah to. I remember I had a pastor one time asked us to pray for Vladimir Putin, and this is long before this current situation. And I remember sitting in the pew, kind of feeling a little uncomfortable about that, and I had to really examine, well, why was I feeling uncomfortable about that? And it's a hard thing to sometimes to get our heads around.
Yeah, and so foreshadowing to Jesus telling us to cross boundaries, to go, bring in the stranger and the foreigner and reach out and try to save everyone, which was not as common then in those times. That, they were like, no, enemies are enemies and they stay enemies. Don't be telling me to cross and bring them back.
Right. Love our enemies. What?
Yeah.
At the very end of Jonah, I know we don't have time to go through all of Jonah today, but the very last bit of it, verse 11, and God answers Jonah and he says, and should I not be concerned about Nineveh, the great city? So he's, kind of giving it back to Jonah, like, yes, I'm concerned about all of my creation. Even Ninevites who don't know their right hand from their left, he says. even those folks.
And the animals.
And the animals, right? And whatever animals are in Nineveh.
Well, it's again kind of, I just thought of like Noah. where a lot of people were destroyed because they were evil, and God said he wasn't going to do that again. So here he's trying to pull out every stop to not have to destroy this evil city, to try to get to them so that he doesn't have to destroy them like he had, said he did not want to destroy again and wipe everybody out. Yet the evil persisted, and so now he needed these prophets to go to these dangerous places and reach out with words of to try to redeem them. So it's like kind of the same thought carrying on here later over the years.
I did, back to Janet's point in chapter 2, in verse 2, I called to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. So Sheol would have been a word for like a hell sort of place, a hellish sort of place. But I love Janet's idea of the time out in the belly. But I know I have been in a place where it's living in this belly of the whale, crying out, like just, full of muck, and why I'm not on Facebook anymore. I felt like I was swimming in sewage of unhappiness and anger and people's nasty opinions. And I had to stop because I felt like I was swimming in yuck. So for me, it was best to not do that anymore. But that just kind of struck me that sometimes you got to get down to the inside the belly before we cry out. Well, before we cry out, place when we realize when you're feeling it, like anger, you can't no forgiveness in your heart. Place where Jonah was. Fear, living in fear of going to the Ninevites, having God forgive the Ninevites. Okay, any last thoughts on any of that? All right, Pastor, before we conclude in prayer, do you want to share about our upcoming schedule?
Yes, so next week we're going to take off. I'm going to be on vacation, and we're going to take a week off. We're going to give ourselves a timeout.
In the belly of the whale.
Belly of the whale. Give ourselves a timeout, and then we will regroup on July 6th, I believe it is. 3, 4, 5, 6 at Sunken Meadow Beach. For those of you that can join us, even for part of it, even if you can't come for the whole time, come for just the worship or come for just the Bible study. Worship is from around 9:30 to 10. Bible study is from around 10 to 11. And hopefully we'll have, last year we had pretty good weather, so hopefully we'll have good weather again this year.
And it's on Wednesday, stays on Wednesday.
It's on Wednesday, but it's in the morning, so it starts at 9:30. Bring a chair and a Bible and a water bottle or something if you need it. It is under a pavilion, so there is shade. But if you're going to go walking around on the beach, you might want to bring a hat or whatever. Anything
And
else?
put on mineral cream.
Anything else I need to tell them about the beach?
Yeah, there's no parking fee.
Sunscreen.
No parking. Yes.
There's no point yet. What was it, Joan?
Mineral sunscreen. Apply it liberally on your face, the exposed parts of your body, because
Not if you're
you'll be
out.
getting sunlight under the pavilion and getting to and from the pavilion.
And sometimes it reflects off the sand and stuff too, even though we don't think it does.
Yeah, sunglasses might be a good idea too.
Glasses, sunscreen. Yep. Water bottle. Keep hydrated.
And while I have a minute before we conclude, all of you are invited Saturday, July 23rd here at St. Peter's. We're doing a card ministry workshop, and it's going to be limited seating. Karen Smith from the Practical Resources for Churches will be here. And it's just a fun day. It's going to be 11 to 1, couple of hours, and we create cards that can be used to be sent out to our various congregations, to people that are shut in or have had an illness, or any sorts of sympathies. So we're going to gather, we're going to create cards. She has everything prepared, and we just kind of assemble them and we stamp them and we create them. There's like a little sample of one I did.
Looks hallmark to me.
We're each going to make 4. 2 we take home, and 2 that we leave at our various churches to be used for sending out notes from the congregation. So I just like to invite everybody to that, and we'll be having like a light lunch that day too. So mark your calendar, Saturday, the 23rd. And if you'd like to come, I just ask you to call over here at St. Peter's at the office, and we'll just jot your name down so we have a list of who will be joining us. But it should be a fun day. So while I had a minute, just wanted to.
Then we have July 3rd, we start our joint worship at Gloria Day, 10 o'clock. So remember that. Be on the road this summer. So it's going to be fun.
Question, will we be singing any hymns on the beach?
It depends on who's leading. We might.
Well, could we know in advance so we can study it in the hymnal? Because unless someone brings some music and the words, it's very hard to follow along if it's a hymn that we don't know.
Again, I know that for the prayers, we're going to try to sing again that Lord, listen to your children praying that we had done last year. Other than that, I have no idea. Each person does their own thing. So we can see if they can let you know ahead of time, but I don't know, since there's a lot of people involved. So
well, hopefully if it's a lot of singing, they'll at least have the text if it's familiar.
Usually if it's a song that people aren't going to know, they'll bring like the sheet music or something so people can follow along the notes, or they might bring a CD or something. So
well, the reason I asked was that one of the hymns that was sung last year or the year before was something I had never heard of before. It's in the hymnal, but I had never heard it. So it just makes one feel very awkward and excluded. Like, gee, I'm a real dummy.
No, it's a way of sometimes we put the new hymns out there just a way of exposing people to new songs. It's not to exclude anyone, it's to learn something new, and we learn it together. It's not and maybe the first time we sing it through, it might be a little awkward, but then sometimes we'll sing it a second time and people know it.
Being at St. Peter's, we've sung so many songs. I've never sung them before, and I've served in a lot of other different churches, and I'm like, wow, I'm still learning new songs from this hymnal.
There's a lot of songs in there, and each congregation has their own set. And everyone thinks, oh, everyone knows this, and then you sing it, and people are like, I never heard that before, and they're like, are you kidding me? We sang it every week in my other congregation. So there's like no way to know who knows what.
Yeah, everybody's got their top choices, right?
But I know usually, in my experience anyway, and I've only done it 1 year at the beach since my first year here, we couldn't do it. The songs that we sang were pretty simple ones that everybody knew. So, but we'll see. I will ask people if they're going to bring some kind of a hymn to think about the singability of it. It's a good point.
Okay, let's pray.
And I think it would be helpful for someone to sing it through.